From San Diego, we decided to take a road trip to the Grand Canyon. It's about a 9-hour trip. You could do it in one day, but we decided to split it in two so we could have some sightseeing along the way. We'll take a look at the map right here. From San Diego, we headed east on Interstate 8 to Yuma, then north to the town of Oatman, where we spent the night nearby in Kingman, and then on the next morning to Grand Canyon Village. Like our previous trip to Julian, up into the San Diego mountains and down into the desert, Interstate 8 takes a different route, but again, a gradual increase in altitude until you reach the summit at about 4,000 feet, and then a steep drop down into the Anza-Borrego Desert.
The California Highway Patrolman were actually recommending people to go over the speed limit out here because of and here we go. Whee!
After several minutes of switchbacks, which are designed to alleviate the grade and help the truckers on the downhill grade, we arrived at the desert floor where you can see a number of windmills that are usually pretty productive in producing electricity because it's flat and there's a lot of wind all the time.
Actually, the traces of that are pretty much gone.
A millennia ago, the Anza-Borrego Desert was underwater. This seabed, while it looks like a desert, is very fertile for growing crops, and so when you bring in irrigation, you find that they can grow crops out here in many areas year-round, even things like wheat in the middle of the winter, because it never gets cold. After driving for 3 hours from San Diego across the desert, we pulled off the freeway in Yuma, Arizona, because we needed a fuel stop. Actually, two of them. One for the car, because the gas was cheaper there in Arizona, in Yuma, and the second for us because it's pretty dry out there and you can get dehydrated because of the low humidity in the desert air, and so we filled up on some of those jumbo-sized drinks that you can really only find in America. The next 3.5 hours driving up from Yuma to Oatman, it pretty much looked like this. It was so boring that at one point Jonatán thought this is a great time to take a nap. And I looked over at him and thought to myself, you know, this would be a great idea for me too, except for one fact, I'm driving the car. They struck gold in Oatman in 1915 and the miners started bringing in burros to use as pack animals. The mines are long since gone, but the wild burros remain here. And they sort of nowadays act as toll collectors. What I mean by that is that sometimes they just block the road and until you pay them a toll, in other words, feed them, they don't want to let you go on. Witness the guy in front of us.
They know they own the town. Look at this. Wow.
They're not lacking in boldness. Hey you, give me some food. You can just see that look on his face. Here comes another meal ticket.
Oh, he just wants food. Oh, God.
Yeah. Oatman nowadays primarily thrives on tourism. A lot of gift shops along the way. This road used to be a main thoroughfare, but now is so far off the beaten track that twice a day during the summer, they close the street to all traffic, and a couple of gunslingers get out there and they reenact an old Western shootout along with a comedy routine, and we got there just in time. The 10-minute performance involved robbing a bank. The young man did. You can just see him between the two gunslingers that just robbed it, and they're going to try and figure out between the two big guys who was going to make off with all the loot.
Draw!
I didn't shoot you. What you looking for? Well, one of you, man. Now, see, I told you to stop buying those Walmart bullets.
China special. Walmart. One Mississippi. Two Mississippi.
Wait a minute. We're not in Mississippi. We're in Arizona. I can't lift their brake 7 times.
I'm on two here.
Ain't gonna shoot on two neither. Gonna shoot on three. Yeah, he's dead.
It's a ghost town. Sometimes you gotta double check.
Have to go and let it get out there.
And we did say get out of town.
Hey, where you going? The horses are down here.
Oh, I know. I'm just gonna go around. I'll meet you later.
You related to him or something?
I don't think so.
Look, you bring that gold right down here right now, or you're gonna have a problem.
Well, no, wait a minute. I'll go.
There.
Yeah.
Let's see. In a world like we live in, ain't nothing fair. That's as fair as you're ever gonna get it.
After leaving Oatman, we drove to Kingman, Arizona nearby, spent the night. The next morning, we headed east on Interstate 40 as we gradually climbed up to altitude to the 7,000 feet elevation of Flagstaff and on up to the Grand Canyon. As we got closer to the Grand Canyon, you'll see that there's a lot of change in the scenery. We start going into some pine forests as we get up in altitude. And as we started to approach the entrance to the Grand Canyon, I had told Jonatán to be on the lookout for the Grand Canyon because it's a hole in the ground. So typically you can drive through this forest and not really see it until you're like literally on top of it. So I wanted to kind of surprise him. So we continued on, and I made a couple of turns here and there, and all of a sudden came around a corner, and there it was. And this is the first thing that he saw when we pulled over to the side of the road a few seconds later. What you see right here off to the right is not the actual canyon itself. It's one of the side canyons, and you see this rock formation that's really, really high juts out into the wide area of the canyon. So basically you can walk on out onto the end of those, and you get great views to the left and right down the whole length of the canyon.
But you see how this point juts out?
Yeah.
Now we're actually walking out, and I was explaining this to him as we walked on out to the edge or the end point of one of those promontories, I guess you'd call them, that jut out into the canyon. And again, when you're out there, you can look left or right down to the east and west of the entire length of the canyon. So they're really great lookout points all along the rim of the canyon that you can drive out to or walk out to. After this, we checked into our hotel, or actually our lodge, and walked on over to our room, which literally was in a lodge almost on the edge of the canyon. We could literally walk 2 minutes from the front door and be right at the edge of the canyon with an incredible view. Here you can get a good idea on this panorama of the size of the Grand Canyon. You can see the Colorado River way in the distance up in the center, up top there. It looks pretty small, but we're over 1,400 meters above the level of the river. It's pretty big. The next morning we arrived at one of the lookout points that jut out into the canyon. We are looking east to the sunrise, but that's not why we came. As the sun rises in the sky, as we look west, it will light up the sides of the promontory rock faces over a 40-minute magical period. But at 10 times the speed, you can enjoy the scene in the following 4 minutes. After breakfast, we started our hike down the South Kaibab Trail. Just a short distance, down 30 minutes into the canyon. It's a 4-hour hike to the bottom.
Is whether it's Kaibab or Bright Angel.
You can see some of the switchbacks that we had already come down. It's steepest at the top.
The steepest is at the end.
Flattens out a bit as you go down into the canyon. Here you get a better view down into the side canyon that we're coming down the face of on the way to Point. Finally, we arrived at Point, and you'll see a couple of pictures we took from there, but no number of pictures can capture how amazing the vistas are, especially from out at those rocks at the end of the point. Couldn't resist a few selfies, just to prove to everybody that we were there and didn't pull all this stuff off the internet. And this is me celebrating the fact that I made it back up to the top and Jonatán didn't have to carry me or push me all the way up. Our next stop was Desert View Tower. It's at the east end of the Grand Canyon, where the Colorado River actually enters the canyon, and so the elevation of the canyon itself is much lower. At the east end of the canyon, the rim is much closer to the river. It's not nearly as high up as we were in the previous pictures. And you can see the Colorado River there in the background and see how muddy it is. From the Grand Canyon, we drove south and then east to Holbrook, Arizona, where I told Jonatán ahead of time that we were going to be staying in a type of accommodation that he and I had never slept in before, and to be on the lookout for something really unusual when we got to Holbrook. Since you're probably curious as to what exactly is in a wigwam, I'll turn it over to Jonatán, who will be your tour guide.
So this is all the space we have here. Fortunately, there's an AC. This is all the space we have in the bathroom. We still have a shower.
Before heading back to San Diego, we made a stop and drove through the Petrified Forest National Park. This national park features a lot of rock and wood formations, specifically petrified wood, a situation where the wood has become fossilized and turned into stone over a period of centuries or millennia. Here at the end you see a really nice example of that. It looks like a bridge or a big log, but it's now fossilized. After leaving the Petrified Forest, we had a 9-hour drive ahead of us, back from northeast Arizona down to the southwest corner at Yuma, and back across the Interstate 8, across the desert of Anza Borrego back into California. But in doing so, we actually climbed up to about 4,000 feet, went through a very nice wooded area that you see here, and then gradually back down into the desert areas of southern Arizona and California. We crossed over into California at Yuma, Arizona again, and found ourselves on familiar territory, a 3-hour stretch across the California desert back into San Diego. It was an amazing road trip, a lot of high points. The highest, of course, was the Grand Canyon, And for us personally, the highest was that 40 minutes watching the sunrise in complete solitude with just the wind and the majesty of the Lord.